everyone. Welcome back to another Trends Talk. I'm Sarah Sladek, your host. And I'm so excited to be joined by Kourtney Shelton today with Redstone. And we're going to learn a lot more about Redstone, which is a millennial founded association management and events organization that they've had exponential growth. And they were just founded 9 years ago. So we're going to hear a lot about that because Kourtney has been really instrumental in honing the culture there. And of course, there's been challenges with that quick growth curve. And so we'll hear more about that. But also, Kourtney is author of the HR Blueprint. She's a professor of human resources. So she is in the know about workforce culture and trends when we talk about the future of work, as well as team building, which is so important. So we are going to dive right in. Here's how this works. We're going to do 5 rounds of questions. I'm going to put Kourtney in the hot seat. We'll dialogue a little bit back and forth, but you have the opportunity to engage with Kourtney and ask questions via the chat. And then at the end of our quick round here, because this is only 30 minutes, folks. This is like power half hour. So then we'll answer the questions that are in the chat. So if you think of something that you're dying to know, be sure to add it into the chat. All right, Chris, back in. We're going round 1. And yes, you'll notice I lost my bell, so I'm improvising because we're live. So, round 1, Kourtney, what current stat or data point best summarizes the need to prioritize workplace culture?
Well, I mean, there are so many that you could gravitate to. Everything online, everything on LinkedIn, everything, all the studies that are coming out are talking about how workplace culture is really driving a lot of the decisions that Gen Zs and millennials and even other generations are making at the moment. I would say the number one stat that I was able to find that I found really informative and helpful was the stat that at the current moment, 1/3 of people are looking for new roles. I bet you it's even higher than that. This was just the survey that I had found. I bet you it's even higher than that. 1/3 of people are looking for new roles. And the number one reason from the people who were surveyed, the number one reason is toxic company culture. And so it's absolutely a very jarring statistic because everybody thinks, and I have people that come to me all the time about, if you could do one thing, if you could change one thing, money, it is the driver of a lot of decisions, but clearly based on this data, it's not. You could give 10 grand more, 10 grand more, 10 grand more, but if you have a toxic culture that isn't sustainable and isn't working, people are out of there. In the same vein and in the same study, it said that 73% of the people who were surveyed have already left another job due to the culture. So of the 7 out of 10 of those people surveyed said, yeah, I have left other jobs purely for the culture. It could have good money and it could have great benefits, but if the culture is challenging and the culture is toxic, that's where the business case for culture really comes from, that there's a cost to toxic cultures.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think that's fascinating because, and we think it's new, but it's really not. Gallup started studying employee engagement in the year 2000. And if you look back at the data, we see really high disengagement, low employee engagement, and the trend has not really substantially changed. So we know that people are just thinking about work in radically different ways. But that's an excellent stat, a scary stat to get us started. Thank you, Kourtney.
For sure. Absolutely.
All right, let's go to round 2 with my makeshift bell. All right. I want to know, as do I'm sure our audience, we've got Gen Z coming into the fold. Kourtney, you are millennial. You work for a millennial company, but I know that you're seeing change because Gen Z is coming in the fold. So how is Gen Z influencing change in workplace culture? What are you observing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at what I hear so much, especially being a millennial, all that I heard when I was entering the workforce, oh, kids these days, they don't know how to work. Kids these days, they don't know how to work. I just saw an article that was posted the other day, and it had a little screen grab or a little clip from newspaper articles starting all the way from like 1920 or something, where it said, people these days, they just don't want to work. And in the 50s, people these days, they just don't want to work. And so, of course, all that I'm hearing is, oh, Gen Z doesn't want to work. The next generation doesn't want to work. I couldn't agree less with that. I think that I think that the next generation is influencing work in a way that we had never even considered. Even of course, as I entered the workforce, all that I heard is that millennials they're changing things. They're lazy. They don't want to work. They want to find the simplest way to get something done. But as millennials are now having children, some of them are having children and some of them are entering the workforce and becoming leaders, and all of that, it's now fostering a highly innovative Gen Z. So they're the generation that are bringing innovation and engagement, and they are tuned in. Now, the other side of it is that for Gen Z, work isn't the center of their lives, which is very different from generations millennial and above. Because even millennials, a lot of our parents are Gen X or boomer generations where work was the complete center, and Gen Z just isn't having that. So they're really moving towards a stronger work-life balance and influencing stronger work-life balance, culture, both culture at the workplace, but also the perception of those workplace cultures in media and everything else. Like, you've got Gen Z making hiring decisions or choosing to enter a company based on what they see online. If they see that company XYZ, company XYZ, a company, whichever company is a toxic company online, on LinkedIn, on whatever, they're making decisions not to join that company. And that's also something that is radically different from all the other generations before, because we didn't have the same access to this kind of information. So I think that they're influencing the workforce, but hot take, I think they're influencing it in a good way. I'm excited for Gen Z. I'm excited for them to come. I'm excited for them to bring their work-life balance and their innovation and their knack for tech. Like, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think Gen Z is also bringing a real focus on things like a call to action. Like, what is your purpose for your company? Are you doing good in the world? I think millennials introduced that, but now we're hearing about, Gen Z coming to job interviews asking, what is your stance on climate change? What is your company doing?
For sure.
And also I think Gen Z too, we're seeing a huge increase in that focus on mental health and caring for the entire employee, and both their personal lives and their professional lives.
Absolutely. And even one more expansion on that, like the similar to the climate piece, but the social justice piece too. Like, you just Gen Z is they're holding these companies accountable to the things that they say and that they do, both online and what their actual values of an organization are. And again, that part is new. Like, that wasn't part of the deciding factors for choosing a job 40 years ago or 50 years ago.
Right. Or even 10.
Even 10. Even
Yeah.
10.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Things keep changing. That's why we're talking trends. All right, let's go to round 3. Woo! You're doing great, Kourtney. What practices have contributed to Redstone's success in the midst of change? Okay, I want to give just a little precursor here to this question. For those of you who are tuning in and you don't know Redstone Agency, which is based in Toronto, Canada, this company was founded in 2015 by millennials. And whoa, this company has grown so fast in 9 years. There are over 200 clients, over 60 employees. I mean, talk about fast growth. Not only that, the company has won and has amassed a lot of awards, recognition, notable achievements, amazing stuff. But obviously, you've got the trajectory of growth, so that incorporates change. You've got new people coming into the fold, that incorporates change. 2015 or in 2024, the it's different than when the organization was founded. You've got that going. So Kourtney, tell us a little bit about workforce culture at Redstone and what you're doing to hang on to that roller coaster.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I gave so much thought to this question and really wanting to give some extra context and some help, because I think that there's a lot of companies that certainly any high growth companies are going to be in the exact same boat. When I think about Redstone on the whole, I think about the truest definition of, innovate, adapt, and overcome. They're Bailey and Carly, the CEO and the president, they're incredibly innovative and adaptive people, and you would have to be in order to grow and double staff every single year, even in a pandemic when events were at either a complete standstill. Not that events are the entirety of our business, but they certainly are a big piece of it. And so I think that there were probably a lot of event companies or association and event companies that found themselves in quite the pickle at that time, because if you couldn't adapt really quickly to the changing market, you were done. There was nothing there. So I think that all of that innovation and all of that engagement and the way that they brought that, I wasn't working for Redstone at that time, the way that they brought the company together and the way that they inspired at that time was directly what contributed to this success. Like getting everybody together, lighting that fire in everybody. How can we change the way that we were doing events, and very quickly, because we still need revenue coming in and we still need to serve our businesses. And for our associations, they needed revenue coming in and they couldn't just go under, they had to keep going. So the truest definition of adapt and overcome. But one of the things that comes with that is that the lack of structure that we had at the time was our strongest asset during COVID, because we could just migrate and move and plot and like move people from one section to another section. Everybody's just moving. But one of the things that we're seeing now in 2024, 4 years post the pandemic, is that lack of structure that helped us is now hurting us. And so that's been a really big piece of my role in coming in, is trying to figure out where can I leverage the strengths that we already have. We know that we're fast and we're innovative and we can adapt, and we know that we're moldable and bendable. But how do I introduce some structure into that? Because now what we're seeing is some burnout due to lack of clarity of roles. And during COVID, everybody took on little bits and bobs of everything. Everybody's got 5% of this and 5% of that. And then as you continue to grow and you're stacking all that growth each year, now all of a sudden, everybody's got quite the mixed bag of duties and accountabilities. And that's creating to what we're at right now, which is a little bit of a place, honestly, of some burnout and some genuine growing pains. And that's where we're at right now. So it's funny because all of the things that made us so successful are now, as we get into like a state of stability from even the economy right now is also challenged, but even as we get into a state of more stability in the economy and more stability post COVID, that same structure is now hurting us. So all the things that really were our strengths then, they're kind of hurting us now. So we're really working on trying to fix those.
Yeah, that's so interesting, So you were flying by the seat of your pants. Now you're saying, okay, we gotta define. What do you think is going to come next? Just a follow-up question to that. What comes after putting some structure into place, and what's the future look like in terms of Redstone's workforce?
Yeah, I think that I know that the future holds, we move to some structure, which is what we're really working on the next few months, like some really strong role clarity. And then what's going to be really, really critically important for this team is strategic planning, really making sure that the growth, because there are so many companies that, not that I'm saying Redstone did this, but there are so many companies that are growth for growth's sake instead of growth for strategy's sake. So sometimes when you're growing, but you're not really sure which direction that you need to go in, it can be growth that's detrimental. And so there will be a really strong focus on growth for strategy's sake, and making sure that if we're expanding markets, that we're thinking about why we even want to expand in that market and what makes sense. And on the workforce side, that strategic planning is pointless if it's not done with the people in mind. How do we inspire the team that we have to reach that growth? How do we make sure we have the right people in the right roles that understand that growth? That's going to really be the next big step for us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I love the words you said at the very beginning. So say them again. It was
innovate, adapt, and overcome.
Okay, love it.
Yeah.
Innovate, adapt, overcome. That's awesome. All right, let's go to our next question.
Absolutely.
Q4. Are we on 4? Yes, we're in round 4. How has being a millennial-driven company, because Redstone is largely millennial, been an advantage? How's it been a challenge? I am so curious to know this because it's great insight as we look at the future and as we look at things like different generations, how they work together, and yeah, just share a little bit about what's the advantage, what's the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Well, even, before even the workforce part, I would have imagined that, not meaning to speak for Bailey or Carly, but I would have imagined that even launching, a business and sustaining its growth as millennials would have already been a bit of a challenge from the start. Getting people to, I know for me personally, I'm young, and I've been ambitious from the gate, and I have hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock of that ambition. So it's like, you are not mature enough to be in this role. You are not strong enough to be in this role. You are too young to be in this role. And I feel like those same things those same walls that I hit would have been some of the same walls that Bailey and Carly would have hit as they tried to build this and tried to sustain that. And even further, I think, and I suspect, and what I'm seeing even now as I'm entering Redstone, I see that that would be a barrier, especially even if you think about some clients. You think about some clients that would prefer to work in the with the generations that more closely match, or what they think are the values of the generations that more closely match their generation. And there is such a tendency for people to gravitate to that. And so I think that that's definitely one of the challenges. And then even if we think about it, millennials supervising Gen Z, you've got a lot of, especially elder millennials, that depending on the ages of their parents, may lean more into Gen X or Boomer thought systems, which aren't necessarily bad, but are just very different than what it's going to take to lead Gen Z. So I think even depending on where you are in the millennial spectrum as well, you could have some bumps along the way of adjusting to the Gen Z way. Like their generations have big spreads. And so I think that that's also depending on exactly who's in the role and all those pieces. I think that could also potentially be a challenge, because I do run into other millennials that are like, Gen Z, nobody wants to work these days. And we can't, I post a job and everybody just wants things to be this way. I even see it sometimes with millennial HR leaders where they're so stuck on the way we used to interview 15 years ago when I very first entered human resources, the way we used to interview, the systems, do this assignment, do that assignment, have 5 rounds with 24 questions. And, Gen Z is just not having that. They're not interested in that. They won't be doing that. And so we have to continue, adapt, innovate, and overcome. And so I think even on the millennial side, we have some of those challenges, but then of course there are some huge strengths. So, millennials are a great sort of straddle generation in the sense that, that we have a good line of sight to outcome-based work and to deliverables-based work. And we also are highly adaptive, not as adaptive as Gen Z is and will be, but we're highly adaptive. We're focused on trends. We're tuned into the market. Like millennials really are a great generation, just as Gen Z will continue to be a great generation. But millennials really are a very strong generation because we're right in that midpoint between knowing what things were before tech really took over, and leveraging tech to our best advantage and in our best interest.
Right, exactly. I think it's fascinating as we talk about Gen Z coming into the fold and looking how things are changing with brain development, social development, what that's going to mean for innovation, which, yes, definitely millennials are at the forefront of that as well. And that adaptability, as you point out. And yeah, it is hard. It's hard to be the new kid on the block and everyone is kind of criticizing that you don't have enough experience. But I don't think that's not how the workforce works anymore. It's not about experience or age or wisdom, which is really a change since the beginning of time when
For
everything
sure.
was very hierarchical. Now it's about that, collective skill sharing, and every generation has something to learn, something to teach. So, yeah,
Yeah,
really, really
absolutely.
fun. Okay, question 5, our last question. So, if you have a question for Kourtney, put it in the chat or in the poll section, and we will get to that shortly. All right, last question from me, Kourtney. What trends are you currently watching or predict impact the future work, let's say in the next 2 to 3 years? So, what's on the horizon immediately?
Yeah, for sure. Well, this one is a funny one because I spoke in, I think 2019 was the year I spoke at Sheridan College, which is like a college local to Toronto. And I remember then I said 4-day work weeks are coming. And I remember all across lots of no, they're not coming. They won't take over. And this was pre-COVID. And I said 4-day work weeks are coming. Trust me, they're coming. And so I think what some trends that I do think are coming is I do think in 2-3 years 4-day work weeks will be, not only are they're already here, so they're here, but they will become much more of the norm, and they will become like the next low hanging fruit that organizations will be moving towards to try to attract Gen Z and to try to get people in, and to try to attract millennials and Gen Z into the workforce. So I think 4-day work weeks are going to be at the forefront of, I think they're going to be in a lot of job postings. Right now, they're in the really trendy job postings. They're in the tech space. They're in those ones that are like pushing the envelope of workforce and benefits and attraction to work. But I think the 4-day work week will take over. I also think remote is here to stay. I think there's definitely been this attempt to pull back everybody into the office. It won't work. It won't work. People know what it's like now to have the kind of flexibility that comes with remote work. I don't think what will happen is like fully remote work, but hybrid work is here forever. It is not going away. Gen Z will not let this go. Millennials will not let this go. So all of the companies that are foot on the gas, no return back into office, people are just leaving. They just won't work for you, because for every one company that's forcing them in, there's one that's saying, no, we're hybrid, we're flexible. And in the ones that do have a hybrid approach or bringing people in, they're bringing them in with purpose. And what I have seen from my work is that Gen Zs and millennials, they'll come in if there's a reason. They'll come in if there's a purpose. But one thing they won't do is trek 4 hours on a train for work they could do from home. That's one thing they won't do. So if the companies really are pushing forward on hybrid or in office, it has to be with purpose. It has to be with meaning, because Gen Z and millennials just aren't having it. I also think another trend is alternative to benefits and pension. So recognizing, of course, we're in Canada, so the universal healthcare, we have a little bit more advantages over maybe some of the US based audiences. But I really do think as Gen Z continues to enter the workforce, especially, there's going to be a pivot for our benefits and pension plans. Like most Gen Zers, they are not focused on RSP and pension plans and any of those other things. And I think even for work in the public sector work, where you've got these beautiful, gorgeous pensions, but you're not attracting the next generation, the next workforce. And eventually, you may have people in the public sector say, well, I don't want Gen Zs. Well, eventually the entire market will be saturated with only Gen Zs. So they're going to need to think about them at some point. And I think making pivots from our traditional benefit and pension plans into things that are adaptive, into things that are flexible benefit plans, an option to have more money instead of an RSP, like giving people that choice. You can opt in or you can opt out. I think that's some of the trends that we're going to continue to see.
Yeah, fascinating. I do agree with that 4-day work week. I think, but I think with the caveat that people will still kind of check in periodically, even if they are, because I still get emails over the weekend.
For sure.
But I'm also hearing a lot of people aren't in the office. So I think it's kind of that hybrid. Yes, I periodically check my email or do a little project, but for the most part, I'm checking out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's interesting that whole quest for work-life balance, and absolutely pandemic accelerated it, as has technology. I'm kind of ready for this. Let's do 4-day work weeks. I think it'd be
Yeah, me
yeah.
too. And you know what? There's a lot of data on it. There is a lot. Like people have poured a lot of time into some
Oh
research on
yeah.
it. There's a lot of data to be shown that that
It
when the
works.
work week was compressed, people were more productive. There's even studies that have come out that people were not only more productive than with the compressed work week, but were more productive than even a 5-day work week. So like
Yeah.
people are doing more work in less time because there's a dangling carrot. If you finish
Right.
this work, you get to be off tomorrow. That carrot works for most people. And you know,
Right.
I really see it coming down the pipeline that's going to be one of the main sort of attraction items that are going to be when job postings go out that are going to be bringing people in.
Yeah, I agree. And I will just add, I think also we'll see a rise or a return in results-oriented work environments. So where it's not about hours or punching a clock or saying, doing things in terms of quantity and chunks of time, but rather this was the objective, the project goal. Did you obtain it? And if
Yeah.
so, then then you've succeeded, kind of that the ROE environment, results-oriented work environment, which made its appearance probably 15, 20 years ago. It's kind of gone by the wayside, but I think that's going to come back.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Well, Kourtney, you did a great job on the hot seat. On my hot seat, I'm going to ask Chris behind the scenes if any questions came into the chat that we can answer in the couple minutes that remain.
We got one question. It's going back to the conversation about multiple generations working together. You mentioned, I'm going to paraphrase the question, what some of the obvious advantages were and from your perspective, and any examples of where innovation was accelerated because of the multiple generations.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think that in my opinion, and I was just having this conversation with somebody, I went out for dinner and I was talking about how the best workplaces that I've ever had have been a mix of like having a multi-generation workforce. Because I think that there are obvious disadvantages of having an entire Gen Z workforce, an entire millennial workforce, an entire boomer workforce. There are disadvantages to that, just as there are disadvantages to having an all-male workforce or an all-female workforce. Or there are pros and cons. I think that the innovation that comes with having a multi-generational workforce is, or I guess I should say, I think innovation only comes when you consider the drivers of each of those generations. Like I think otherwise you end up in these different camps where it's like they're almost pitted against each other. That you've got like the wisdom crew who knows a lot and have lived experience, and then you've got the innovative crew. And when you don't mush them in together, when you don't make sure that departments are effectively intermixed, and when or like projects are effectively intermixed, I think it only creates like a separation and a detachment from that innovation. But I think that the companies that do intermix these teams and intermix these departments really knock this out of the park and have like real genuine innovation, because you're stacking wisdom on innovation and creativity, and then you're layering in problem solving, and when you do that, you can reach huge lengths with your departments and with your projects.
Exactly. Cognitive diversity, baby.
Absolutely.
Bringing those different backgrounds, skill sets, experiences, mixing it up.
Yes,
That's great
for sure.
innovation. It's great relationship building. Everyone's learning something, teaching something.
Yes.
Greater sense of feeling like you belong, like you're part of the solution, you're part of the team. So yeah, I 100% agree with
For
what
sure.
you said. Yeah. All right. Any other questions in the queue, Chris? Otherwise, our time is up. We've got 1 minute.
Went by so fast.
It did. It did. Kourtney, you were an excellent guest. So thank you very much for imparting your wisdom, which
Of course,
isn't,
thank you.
as we learned on this Trends Talk, wisdom is not the equation of age, but of other skills. So yeah, thank you for imparting your wisdom, Kourtney, and congrats to Redstone. Congrats to you and all your success. Special thanks to everyone for tuning into Trends Talk. I'll be back again next month talking with Jeff Leitner, who has worked with many of the nation's largest corporations on preparing for the future work. All right, I'm Sarah Sladek, and thanks again for tuning in to Trends Talk.